Venezuela, 5:12 a.m. A damp morning on the coast of Puerto Cabello. About 160 nautical miles offshore, a U.S. Navy surface action group changes course by just 5 degrees. An ordinary, routine maneuver. But on the Venezuelan side, the reaction is extreme, as warning lights successively illuminate a chain of hardened missile positions carved deep into the hills. Radar screens glow. Power generators begin to roar. In theory, the balance of forces appears uneven. Rusting coastal missile batteries facing a multi-layered American shield valued at tens of billions of dollars. Venezuelan crews believe that today is their moment, but they do not realize that every switch they turn on is already being measured, mapped, and quietly exploited. Arleigh Burke is a class of guided missile destroyers that sits at the heart of the U.S. system, with a displacement of more than 9,000 tons and a hull valued at roughly $2 billion before any weapons are installed. On its decks are more than 90 vertical launch system (VLS) cells, ready to fire, SM-2 and SM-6 interceptors for air defense missions, Tomahawk cruise missiles capable of striking targets over 1,000 miles away, long before an enemy ever sees the ship, and RUM-139 ASROC anti-submarine rockets. The ship does not need to threaten anyone. It simply exists like a chess grandmaster who has already envisioned every future move, rendering the opponent's plans meaningless. Alongside it, the AN-SPY 1D Aegis radar does more than merely observe. It interprets the entire battle space, distinguishing missiles from seabirds and tracking targets at nearly 200 miles, far beyond visual or radar range, while sharing real-time data across the entire U.S. combat network. Venezuela's radars must emit actively to detect anything. Meanwhile, the U.S. system can sit back and listen, transforming raw signals into comprehensive battlespace awareness. In the air, F/A-18EF Super Hornet fighters patrol at distances beyond the reach of most coastal missiles, their AESA radars functioning like patient sentinels, while an E-2D advanced Hawkeye flies high like the conductor of the aerial picture, extending detection ranges to nearly 600 kilometers and weaving every piece of information into the decision-making cycle. Beneath the waves, a U.S. Navy nuclear-powered attack submarine glides silently. Its purpose is not to fire torpedoes immediately, but to exist as an invisible denial system, undermining every calculation made by opposing planners. The mere possibility of its presence is enough to collapse confidence in coastal defense, making Venezuela's fixed launch batteries appear like static museum exhibits when faced with a dynamic, unseen hunter. The strategic embarrassment is clearly revealed through cost asymmetry. A single Venezuelan coastal missile battery may represent years of training and investment, yet the United States could neutralize it through cyber operations, electronic warfare, or with just a single Tomahawk missile, costing only a few $1 million. Inside U.S. command centers, the atmosphere is clinical, voices calm and procedural. Venezuela's defenses switching to active mode does not surprise them. On the contrary, it confirms that the opponent is acting exactly within a system that was designed to dominate long before any confrontation ever began. 5:15 a.m. Along the ridgelines west of Puerto Cabello, Venezuela's coastal surveillance radars switched from passive monitoring to continuous high-power emissions, sweeping the sea like searchlights. On U.S. consoles, the change registered immediately. Frequency bands, pulse rates, rotation speeds, even the tiny vibrations of aging motors. 168 nautical miles offshore, the American destroyer maintained 22 knots, but its combat posture tightened. The Aegis display reclassified coastal radars from background to threat queue, while the electronic warfare suite did what it does best, listening without overreacting. 30,000 feet above the formation, an E-2D advanced Hawkeye held a racetrack orbit, extending the air picture far inland. To Caracas, it looked provocative. To the US, it was entirely predictable. When a missile battery goes live, it leaves an unmistakable signature on the electromagnetic spectrum, and that signal is information. 5:23 a.m. Two Su-30 Mk2 fighters launched from a central coastal base, accelerating past 400 knots toward the US formation. They initially stayed low under the clouds to reduce radar exposure, then climbed to around 18,000 feet to give their sensors a clearer line of sight. Simultaneously, a coastal missile battery completed its drill. Launchers elevated, canisters aligned, crew chiefs announcing readiness that sounded like final preparation to fire. On paper, the range was intimidating. Modern anti-ship missiles could threaten ships over 100 nautical miles away, and the Su-30s pushed targeting cues outward, compressing American decision time. But the US responded without drama. 2 Super Hornets slid into a forward screen, their AESA radars scanning without broadcasting excessively, while the destroyer's radar stayed disciplined, tracking without panic. The US didn't need to chase, it only needed to understand the pilot's intentions. Every flight path, heading, and altitude change of the Su-30s was logged like entries in a ledger. 5:34 a.m. Venezuela attempted to tighten the loop by passing targeting data from shore to aircraft, back to shore, and onward to the launcher. In theory, this is how coastal defense becomes lethal, a continuous chain from detection to fire. In practice, the chain was fragile. Over the water, a Super Hornet subtly turned, not to point weapons, but to open its electronic attack window. The effect was immediate at the edges and subtle, the center. Radar returns smeared. Shore-based tracking became intermittent. Missiles remained on their rails, still ready, but their targeting picture wavered. And in ships moving 20+ knots, wavering is a fatal weakness. The US escalated pressure without firing. The destroyer sent an MH-60R helicopter 40 nautical miles ahead of the formation, flying low and fast over the sea. Its mission was not attack, but forward sensing, feeding live maritime tracks back into the Aegis network. Simultaneously, the E-2D adjusted altitude to improve radar geometry over land, refining coastal radar locations to within seconds and meters. To Venezuela, the helicopter appeared exposed. To the US, it was bait, protected by invisible layers. The formation had created its own control chain without closing distance. If a missile battery attempted to lock, that signal would become a beacon. 5:41 a.m. Coastal operators, seeing degraded signals, tried to compensate by increasing power and narrowing beams. Signals sharpened, focused. But to the US, this was confirmation, not escalation. Aegis threat logic now counted seconds. A pair of Super Hornets climbed to 20,000 feet to widen their view, forcing the Venezuelan Su-30s into a choice: push into a far superior air defense bubble, or fall back and lose their ability to provide targeting data. They chose the middle ground, staying 70 to 90 nautical miles from the US formation, careful not to cross the warning zone. The US demonstrated control by doing less. Instead of launching missiles, it deployed precise, limited, reversible electronic interference. On Venezuelan radar, the sea became unreliable. Contacts drifted, track numbers flickered. Launchers remained ready, but their confidence to fire eroded. They weren't blind, they simply couldn't trust what they saw. And in missile warfare, doubt can turn deterrence into self-inflicted disaster. 5:56 a.m. The Venezuelan Su-30s peeled away quietly, returning to base to conserve fuel and avoid pursuit, which the US didn't need to initiate. Onshore, the missile battery lowered its readiness, not admitting defeat, but the detection to launch chain had been disrupted enough that firing would be a gamble. Offshore, the US formation widened by a few dozen nautical miles, still monitoring every movement. The Hawkeye returned to its previous altitude, calm and patient. Beneath the surface, the American submarine continued quietly gathering final data: shutdown sequences, communication patterns, and behavioral signatures of a force realizing, without a single shot fired, that going live also means exposing everything. By mid-morning, the standoff off Venezuela's northern coast dissolves quietly. Coastal missile batteries, about 30 systems with ranges of 100 to 150 nautical miles, return to standby. Caracas calls it routine readiness exercises, carefully avoiding any admission of pressure. On the surface, nothing happened. Strategically, everything did. Every radar ping, every data link between Su-30 fighters and shore batteries is recorded by the US Navy. An Arleigh Burke-class destroyer, 9,000 plus tons, valued at $2 billion before a single missile, watches silently with 90 VLS cells loaded with SM-2, SM-6 interceptors, Tomahawks, and ASROC. FA-18EF Super Hornets patrol outside Venezuelan missile ranges, while an E-2D advanced Hawkeye extends surveillance nearly 400 miles inland, deep into the mainland. No shots fired, yet the US collects a priceless intelligence picture: radar frequencies, reaction times, command behaviors, coordination gaps. Cost-benefit favors the US massively. Maintaining Venezuela's coastal batteries is expensive and politically risky. US forces, already deployed for presence, adjust course, extend patrols, and operate electronic systems. Minimal extra cost, maximal strategic gain. Caracas expends resources just to appear assertive. Most striking, nothing else happens. No exclusion zone, no strike, no escalation. The US posture communicates calm control. Su-30s peel back, missile crews relax, and the region resumes normal operations. In modern deterrence, the loudest systems aren't the strongest. The power lies with those who can stay silent and still maintain complete control. 36 hours after the encounter, regional media described the event as a moment of tension narrowly avoided. State outlets emphasized sovereignty and readiness, while international coverage noted that no missiles were fired and no losses occurred. The contrast between rhetoric and reality offers a clear lesson. Operational freedom at sea remained unchanged, and that outcome spoke louder than any statement. For planners observing from afar, the episode reinforced a familiar pattern. Control is demonstrated not through escalation, but through restraint backed by capability. This approach reflects a broader doctrine practiced by the US Navy and joint forces: deterrence through denial rather than punishment. When an adversary cannot reliably detect, target, or commit, the threshold for violence rises naturally. The risk ceases to be the American response and becomes the opponent's own miscalculation. Modern military power is measured not by the moment a missile leaves its rail, but by everything that happens before that decision. Networks, discipline, and composure can produce results without firing a shot. In this encounter, nothing exploded, and that is precisely the point. Effective deterrence succeeds when the most dramatic moment never occurs.